The mount is one of the most powerful attacking positions in jiu-jitsu. It's powerful because you can go for their collars, you can go for their arms, you can do all sorts of stuff, and even work in double attacks, whereas all they have to be concerned with is survival and escape. So you're on the offense here. One of the most basic but also powerful attacks from the mount is the Americana, the bent arm lock. We're going to go over some details on how to make it successful from the mount. So if Elias has headed to your feet here, please. Awesome, there we go. So again, the Americana is a bent arm lock that hyper rotates his shoulder. A lot of times this gets the bad rap as a big person move because a lot of times guys that are big and strong who come in their first day and they're just like, oh, I can move your arm. And that happens, right? Strength is a real thing. But there are also some really powerful details that make this a really good smaller person move as well. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about how to get some of those. So first, mount control basics. If we start to get our mount disrupted, we just go back to controlling the mount and then we attack later. But so our knees are wide, our heels are tucked under his butt, we're getting ready to use our hands to base. But after we've established that, okay, we're controlling, we're not at risk of getting dismounted, we're gonna start to attack. And a lot of times, Elias is gonna do this type of defensive posture because he doesn't want me to get his collar, right? Very tough to get my hand in his collar if he's just, his hands are up there defending it. However, his arm is right there. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick a side, we're gonna go two hands on one on that arm, and we're gonna get it to the mat. So I'm gonna do it the basic version, the first, and then we're gonna go over some critical details. So two hands on one hand on the wrist, one hand on the elbow, give it a little shimmy, and my whole body comes to the mat. My elbow goes right next to his ear. At this point, I'm in a really good position. My head is up for the sake of teaching, but when I do this, I like to have my forehead against the heel of my hand just to make my base as low as possible. I'm gonna lift his elbow, come under, and grab my own wrist. Now, the flexibility of the shoulder is proportional to the height of the elbow, so I want his elbow low. What I mean by low is I try to take his elbow down toward his hip, and Elias is probably gonna tap just from that, right? So, whereas if he's up here, I can crank a little bit, but I don't want to do that because it creates space. So, proper way to finish, head down on the heel of your hand, move the elbow south, very gently roll your wrists forward and lift the elbow. I'll talk more about each of those details in a moment. It's very important that my elbow be on the mat. So if I'm just trying to move his arm like this, Elias can bridge. Now I have to give it up because I'm going to go over. You always compromise a little bit of control in order to attack, and so if I'm using two hands on his arm to attack his arm, I can't use one of those hands to post. So when he makes me post, I have to give up on the attack. So let's go over that with a few more details. So a couple of different things. I'm gonna give you two details for how to separate his elbow from his body, one of which you should absolutely do and one of which you should never do. So one thing you should absolutely do is you should absolutely move his elbow and wrist at staggered angles. So like this. So Elias, try and stop me. Really easy, right? Second, it's gonna make it even better. You should never extend your arms fully for a couple of reasons. We're weak here, right? We're strong here, we're weak here. Also, my favorite Americana escape is for Elias to take that other, yes, and put it in my armpit. So when I extend my arms, I expose myself for that escape. So one thing you should always do, you should always do the little wiggle. One thing you should never do is extend your arms. So instead, I want your elbows in tight against your hip. And now, see how I don't give him the opportunity to do the escape. Elbow drops to the mat. Head drops down. Lift, under. One quick demonstration. You see how his elbow is really high? The finish motion for this the two other finishing details that we haven't talked about much is I rev my wrists like a reverse rev in a motorcycle, so I roll my wrists forward. And then the other is that I lift his elbow. So you see how it's taking him a long time to tap. The reason it's taking him a long time to tap is his elbow is high up by his elbow. Those are three finishing details, is that we take his elbow down by his hip, we roll our wrists forward like this, and then we lift his elbow. If you do it correctly, even just one of those should be able to get the tap. So I'm not gonna do either of the rev or the lift. I'm just gonna move his elbow south. You see how he taps, right? Whereas up here, I'm doing this and he still doesn't have to tap. So elbow south, rev, and gently lift your partner's elbow. A lot of people call this the paintbrush because, as you can see, it's like I'm painting the map with the back heel of his hand. Again, a lot of folks think of this as a strength move, but with these technical details, elbows in tight, two hands on one, wiggle, 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 you'll be able to get a lot of folks with the Americana. What's also excellent about the Americana is if you don't get that submission, you're still able to set up another submission called the head and arm choke or the arm triangle, which we'll go over at a later date.